Now, Canadians have started voting in the country's parliamentary elections that could give them a first new leader in nearly a decade. Incumbent Conservative leader Stephen Harper is fighting for a fourth term, but the opinion polls say Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is leading the race. For more analysis on the elections, let's go to Maxwell Cameron in Vancouver. He's the director at the Centre for the Study of Democratic Institutions at the University of British Columbia. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, this election is being called the closest fought poll in the country's history. Why is that?
Well, it's the longest election campaign we've had, 78 days. It started off as an incredibly tight race between the Conservatives, the incumbents, the Liberals, and the New Democratic Party. But in the last few weeks, we've seen a real erosion of support for the Socialists, the NDP, and a concomitant rise of the Liberal Party. So it now looks as if, at least according to the current polls, the Liberals are poised to overturn the Conservative government.
OK, now Stephen Harper, he's fighting for a rare fourth term. His attack ads, if you like, have said Trudeau is not ready to take office. Does he have any credibility in that claim?
Well, that was a claim that was designed to worry Canadian voters that perhaps young Justin Trudeau, the son of the very well-known former Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau, was simply not sufficiently experienced to run the country. But the fact of the matter is that this very long campaign has given Mr. Trudeau many opportunities to prove his mettle. He's performed very well in the debates, and he's run a very strong campaign, even outflanking the more left-wing NDP, representing himself as the best chance the Canadians have of changing government. And so I think that the strategy of trying to paint him as being not ready really hasn't worked. OK, and what about the Indigenous population of Canada? Historically, they've had very low participation rates in elections. Why is that? Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, if you were a member of the First Nations community, you couldn't vote until quite recently. And for many people who are members of First Nations, they don't regard themselves as first and foremost citizens of Canada so much as members of their own nations, and they want to negotiate nation to nation with the rest of Canada. We had a Royal Commission about 2 decades ago that looked at the question of Indigenous people and how to repair that relationship. Unfortunately, almost nothing has been done about that. And so we're seeing a real growth in Indigenous militancy in Canada. In recent years, a movement called Idle No More has emerged that's channeled much of the frustration of Indigenous people in Canada. But the frustration has been channeled into street protests and popular movements rather than into electoral politics. That said, there are a number of Indigenous candidates running in these elections. OK, Maxwell Cameron, thank you very much for the update.